Déjame presentarte a la consultora internacional, oradora, también miembro de WLB y por supuesto CEO de The Walker Thomas Group, nuestra querida Erika Walker.
Good morning, everyone. How are you? How are you? How are you? Thank you, Sylvia, so much for that introduction. And Janine, I have to also thank you for inviting me to be a part of the Women Leadership and Beyond vision of yours. It is a vision I share as well. So thank you so much. And so to those of you in the audience, welcome again. It is really an honor. It's an honor to be here and be a part of the awakening of women around the world. We are showing up as leaders in record numbers. And it's not just because we're better. Well, we are a little bit better, but it's not just because we're better, but because, and it's not because we don't want men around, right? But it really is our time to restore balance. And as we awaken, we not only just awaken, but what we're doing is we're restoring balance to the whole world. So that's what makes this topic so very important. But in order to bring this balance to the world, we've got to find balance within ourselves in our daily lives. So that's why I really want to focus on this topic of well-being. Today, we're going to talk about resilience, being resilient in terms of our self-care. We're going to talk about prioritizing ourselves, and we're going to talk about tangible strategies that you can use. So with that said, I am going to share my screen so we can dive right in. All right. So before we jump into the content, we are talking a lot about self-care, but sometimes people don't really know what that means. So I want to define it very quickly. It's an action that you can use to improve your health. Uh-oh, there we go. Sorry about that. All right, let's try it again. It's an action that we can use to improve our health and our well-being. There are 6 different elements to self-care: physical, psychological, spiritual, emotional, social, and professional. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I hear a lot of women say, well, I work out all the time, so I'm really practicing self-care. Or they say, I'm spending a lot of time with my family on the weekends, so I'm really taking care of myself by relaxing on the weekends. And while those are both parts of self-care, self-care really has all of these elements involved. So it could be why sometimes, even if you are working out all the time, you practice yoga, you're still feeling really tired, or sometimes you can't focus. And it's because that perhaps you are not looking at all of these areas. So I want to make sure we hit that right up front. So let's talk about why this is even important. Where are we today? What is bringing this topic to the forefront? So as you know, we have a global pandemic going on right now. We've got social unrest going on in many areas of the world. We have an economic crisis going on in many parts of the world. We have a health crisis outside of COVID going on. So all of this together is really making life a lot more stressful. But in addition to that, what we're really dealing with is also our individual stories, right? Our individual stories. So if you would allow me, I want to talk about just my story and how I got here and why this is so important to me. So if you read my bio, you'll see that I own a consulting firm. It focuses on diversity and inclusion and leadership development and coaching. I wrote a book a couple of years ago. And so life's exciting, right? But it wasn't always that way. So probably, I think it was like 8 years ago or so, I was going through a divorce. We didn't fight, we didn't have a lot of drama as some couples do. I moved back home to Chicago, but my ex-husband would not sign the paperwork. And I thought, why is that? I mean, we're not arguing over anything, but it took him a year to sign the paperwork. And when it came to literally just like almost a year, I had a stroke. And I thought to myself, how do I have a stroke? That's for other people. But I was watching television one day, my chest was tight every time. And so it was making me lean forward. And every time I tried to move back, it was hurting even more. The pain was going down my arm. So I actually thought maybe I'm having a heart attack. So I didn't call an ambulance. I drove myself to the ER, which I don't recommend that you do. They checked, I wasn't having a heart attack. They did an MRI and they found that actually it was a stroke. Luckily, no major damage. I was off for about 3 months. But what it was for me was a wake-up call. It was a reminder for me that I was holding a lot in. I had just moved back to the city. I was starting over again. I was annoyed that he hadn't signed the papers. So all of these things were coming together. Fast forward to last year. Last year, COVID impacted us all. But it happened to be the best year I've had in my own business, being in business 11 years now. I had an overwhelming number of clients, but I felt a lot of pressure. I felt pressure to share what I knew because now people were really interested in diversity and inclusion. They were really interested in self-care, and I felt an obligation to help. But I was also taking care of myself and my family and my dogs and worried like everybody else. So I found myself again towards the end of the year getting really sick. So what is my point here? My point is all of us have a story, okay? And all of us are great women doing amazing things. But when we don't take care of ourselves, it doesn't put us in the best position to do the things that we're here to do. And a part of that, again, is to restore balance to our families, to our communities, and to the world at large. So I want you to think about, what is your story? What is your story? But from those experiences, I want you to know that I learned 3 very, very important things. Everything in the outside world that I'm experiencing started in my mind first. I'm going to say that again. Everything I'm experiencing in the outside world, all the wonderful things, all the artwork that you see, beautiful dinners that you attend, your beautiful home, everything starts in your mind first. And all the yucky things that you might be experiencing, it starts in your mind first. And so I had to think about, as I was going through these experiences several years ago with the divorce, and then last year, what was starting in my mind first? What was I thinking about? Because the second thing I learned is that when I'm not intentional about my thoughts, when I'm not intentional about my own well-being, then my world becomes accidental. So I like to say I accidentally had a stroke. And by that, I mean, I wasn't focused on well-being. I was focused on lots of other people. I was focused on what strong people look like. Strong people don't get upset. You're not fighting. You don't deserve to be upset. It's no big deal to move to a new city. Last year, I was thinking, oh, well, you've got to be strong for everybody else. But my mind wasn't thinking about well-being. So my point to you is everything starts with an idea. And so what are your ideas about well-being? Because at the end of the day, the third thing I learned is that the most important relationship you can ever have is the relationship you have with yourself. What are you saying to yourself? How are you treating yourself? How are you loving yourself? Okay. So with that said, when we go back to these 6 elements of self-care, we have to make sure that they're all going in the right direction, or more importantly, in the same direction, because sometimes we say one thing, but we do something else. So we say we want to have self-care, but then physically we sit all day in front of the computer and we don't necessarily take breaks every hour. We say we want self-care, but psychologically what we say to ourselves are things like, oh, I should be doing more, I'm not good enough. So everything has to be going in the same direction. So what's getting in the way of us doing that? And I just want you to think about that for yourselves. What's getting in your way from practicing really great self-care? What I have found is things like ambition. I found things like belief systems, only weak people dedicate time to self-care. I also find that worry prevents us from really taking care of ourselves. And here's what's funny about worrying. When you worry, it gives you an illusion that you're really doing something, that you are actively protecting yourself from this thing happening or that thing happening. But worry isn't doing anything. It actually isn't doing anything at all but negatively impacting your health. So I'm going to talk a little bit later when we get to tactics on how we can start to let the worry go. Okay. So the part that I'm sure you're all been really waiting on is, how do we create greater self-care? Well, we can do this in many, many different ways. So the first way, I think, is through emotional intelligence. Many of you have heard of emotional intelligence in your organizations. It's widely talked about now. And so it's a skill set used in the recognition, in the use, in the understanding, in the management of your own emotions. That's key. And the emotional state of others, so you can solve social and internal problems and regulate behavior. I know that's a mouthful, but the bottom line here is emotional intelligence allows you to first control you, because really that's all you can do. And then it helps you to be in a position that you can deal with other things that are going on and regulate your behavior accordingly. This is a way that you can take care of yourself. So if you're familiar with emotional intelligence, you know it has 4 different quadrants. I won't go into all of them. I'm just going to focus on 2, and those are self-awareness and self-management. So when you think about self-awareness, what we're really talking about is being able to identify your emotions. And why is that important? I know all of us have gotten up, or we're in the middle of the day and a friend calls and they say, how you doing? What's going on? And you're like, I'm just not in a good mood. I don't know what it is. Exactly. You don't know what it is because we just know we don't feel right. I can't focus today. So it's important that we're able to really identify the emotion. I'm frustrated. I'm scared. I'm worried. Whatever that is, because when we know what it is, then we have an opportunity to do something about it. Self-awareness allows us to have a more accurate self-perception. Sometimes when there's a lot going on, we are down on ourselves. We are not seeing ourselves well. We're not seeing our strengths. We're not as confident, and we are not aware of our energy. We're also not aware of the power that we have within. So self-awareness is key. Then there's self-management. So once you become self-aware, you've got to manage what you figure out. So that's around controlling your impulses. It has to do with managing your stress, being more disciplined, and this is really key. So if you recall, I talked about how important it is for all of those elements of self-care to be going in the same direction. Well, it takes some discipline to do that. So self-management is around discipline and being organized and setting goals. So these 2 areas are very helpful in self-care. What the research says is that people who have higher emotional intelligence tend to have greater empathy, better decision-making, more satisfying relationships, greater job satisfaction, lower likelihood of burnout, and then they have more creativity to connect and succeed with other people. If you haven't read this information before, what the research says is that emotional intelligence is actually more important than IQ. So we call it EQ, right? So they say that EQ, your emotional quotient, is more important and it's a better predictor of success than IQ. Okay, so keep this in mind. And here's the flip side of this. If you have lower emotional intelligence, what that means is you're probably physically exhausted, you are probably emotionally exhausted, and after a while, you just burn out. Or, like me, you have a stroke. And we don't want to have any accidental strokes. And then it's hard to be retained. And by that, I mean the retention is hard to maintain on your jobs. If you have employees that are having low emotional intelligence, but also just retention in life, the activities you're doing, and being a mom, a wife, a friend. And so all of that impacts your work and it impacts your outcomes. So make sure you start to read more and pay more attention to your emotional intelligence. So let's get a little deeper into how we can create greater self-care. And I'm going to focus in on our self-awareness. So self-awareness, very quickly, it's just the ability to take an honest look at your life without attachment to it, without it being right or wrong. I like to call it being the observer in your life, just almost as if you're taking a video of a day and just seeing, well, what am I doing? How am I reacting? How am I showing up? And we do that because it helps us to identify our emotions. You remember early on, I said to identify your emotions is really important because when we identify them, we can do something about it. So I know it's probably very difficult to see on the screen, but what you see here is all these different emotions, from surprise to neutral to anger, fear, happiness. And when you see these colors, what it's showing you is where it tends to show up in your body. So if you look at the third little stick figure, if you will, you'll see that it's yellow, and it's yellow in the head and in the chest area and down the arms. And so if you can't identify the emotions, sometimes you can think about, well, what am I feeling? And I'll tell you, when I had that stroke, I told you I was feeling it in my chest. It was going down my arm. I was also having headaches. And guess what? I had a lot of pent up anger that I wasn't talking about. So if you have a hard time identifying your emotions, you can Google or ask me. I'd be glad to send this to you. But this is a way to better identify what's going on so that you can do something about it. Because as you start to pay attention, you'll notice, oh, I'm feeling this all the time. I wonder why. Now, conversely, you see love, that's on the second row, the fourth person. It's almost all over their body, because love is something that does kind of take over your whole body. So another way to practice self-awareness is through mindfulness. It is a focus on being intensely aware of what you're sensing and feeling in the moment without interpretation or judgment. A lot of people have been talking about mindfulness, and I'm a strong proponent of it. I will tell you that sometimes I set an alarm 3 times a day. Once in around noonish, once at about 5, and once at about 10 o'clock, because I tend to go to bed at midnight. And what I'm doing when I set that alarm is I'm just checking myself. I'm having a mindfulness moment. And when I set the alarm, which I have set for today at noon, what I'm going to do is think about who I've been and how I've been showing up from this morning to noon. I'm going to replay what's been going on. I'm going to think about if I've been present or if I've been just kind of going along on automatic. I'm going to look at my body. Are my shoulders up or are they down? Have I been smiling or not? But this is a way, no judgment. This is just a way for me to check in with myself, because if I do that at noon, I have an opportunity to make a change for the rest of the day. So I do it at 5-ish, and I do it again at 10 because, often I am still working. And at 10 o'clock, I check in. Did you eat today? Sometimes I'm moving very quickly. Okay. There we go. So here's a mindfulness exercise that you can do. I told you a story about my stroke. I told you a story about last year. And so I want you to just think about this. As you were listening to my story, what sort of feelings did you have? What was going on in your body? What were you saying to yourself? Were you saying, you know what? I can relate. I haven't had a stroke, but I've been there and I can relate. Were you saying, well, that'll never happen to me. I work out every day. Were you saying, I better watch out? But think about that, because this allows you to be more mindful about your thoughts and your body and how you respond to different things. Oh, it looks like my screen is stuck. Let me see if I can stop and start again. It occasionally happens. All right. Technology, we all love it, don't we? Okay. Thank you for your patience. I so appreciate you. Okay, so let's move on now to coping skills. How do we start to cope a little bit more? How do we manage things once we figure out, well, listen, I am feeling these ways day to day. My body is tense. Well, I have a list of coping strategies here, and I'm going to go through multiple lists because I want you to walk away with things that you can actually do that'll make a difference. So first, develop coping strategies so that you have something that you can go to when things arise. A lot of times what happens is we wait on something to happen, and then we start to think, well, what should I do? I would certainly take notes from this presentation so that the next time something comes up, you have something that you can go to. I want you to map out your day, and I want you to identify those times and those tasks where you feel most stressed so you can make a plan. So as an example, I'm not a morning person. So because I know that, I don't always plan the most important things that I have going in the morning because I know that that's not good for me. And if I do, like a conference like this, I get up a little earlier so I can get into my rhythm, into my personality, into myself. That's the plan around it so that I'm not my usual grumpy. Establish going home rituals and create clear boundaries. What I mean by that is if you are back to work, when you go home, go home. Let work go for a while. I know that's hard to do. Many of us take work home, but when we do that, it's like we never give ourselves a chance to relax. If you're still working from home, make a time where you're just done for the day, or at minimum, you're going to take a solid 4-hour break. Because if you don't do that, you're going to have a hard time really unwinding. Talk to colleagues, process your emotional day. Don't keep it in like I did. Right before you leave. And that could be just journaling. What was my day? What came up for me today? What did I learn? Create a to-do list. I always create a to-do list before I go to bed, because that way when I'm in bed, I'm not circling in my mind all of the things I have to do. Don't forget this, don't forget that. I can go to bed with complete peace because I already wrote it all down. Listen to an audiobook maybe on the way home if you're going into work, play uplifting music, or just sit in silence, which is one of my most favorite things to do. If you find that it's uncomfortable for you to do that, then it's probably telling you something. If you need to be thinking and moving all of the time. So make sure that you can take just 10 to 15 minutes just to sit in silence, because there are things that will come to you that would not come if you have a radio on or television on or you're going through social media. I have another list of things that we can do that helps you to cope with stress. And this is based on neuroscience. And I love these. You may not have heard, but to gargle. If you gargle, and I mean just take a quarter cup of water, you don't have to have anything special in it, and gargle. Hold your head back and gargle. What this does is it stimulates a particular nerve that allows you to relax. If you Google stimulate the vagus nerve, you will read all about it. But trust me, it works. So if you are stressed in the middle of the day, take a cup, go to the bathroom, gargle about 3 times, and I'm telling you, it'll make the world of difference. And finish that with drinking some water. Okay. Also, breathe. I, excuse me, I don't know if you know that many times when we are stressed and not taking care of ourselves, we're actually holding our breath. And it is an odd thing, but it's almost like a natural thing. We're holding our breath. So what you want to do is breathe in and breathe out, but you want to try and exhale as long, twice as long as you inhale, so you can let all of the breath out. Next, butterfly taps across the arms. So I hope you can see me, but you take one hand and put it on this shoulder, put another hand and put it on this shoulder, and then you want to tap in an alternative manner like this. If you are really stressing, and I invite you to do this along with me, if you're really stressing, you will find that this can help. Okay? And by the way, you can do this anywhere. If you find that you are working in an open space and you're uncomfortable doing it, just run to the ladies' room and do this. Also, smell something that you have an emotional connection with. I know that might sound weird, but if any of you have dogs, they say that when you leave on vacation or you leave for work, you should leave something that smells like you because it brings them comfort. Well, the same thing happens with us. We have comfort in the same way when we smell things that matter. So right now I have a candle going and I love this scent and it makes me feel good and it allows me to relax. Keep that going all of the time. And then movement. Powerful movement like dancing, it really goes hand in hand with mental health. And it might be something that Lucy talks about, but real movement, not just side to side, but really move around. And sometimes we think, well, that's not going to matter. But if you just stop, get up, turn some music on, jump around, dance, you will find it makes the world of difference. Trust me. And also, it's been backed by neuroscience. So this isn't just me, but this has been well researched. Also, we can practice self-management through gratefulness. I want you to think about this. Gratefulness allows you to detach from a stressful period and savor a positive memory or positive experience. This can create a sense of well-being, and it also distracts you from what it is that you could be worried about. Gratitude enhances your emotional resilience and it builds your inner strength. So I start my morning every morning with 10 things that I'm grateful for. I try to do that before I move out of bed. And it doesn't always have to be something significant. It can be something as small as, oh, these sheets feel so good. I had such a good night rest. The breeze that's coming in feels so wonderful. Grateful for my dogs. I'm grateful for my parents. I'm grateful to be able to attend conferences like this. Whatever it is, because here's the thing, while I'm in this mode and this feeling of gratefulness, I can't also worry. you can't have two competing emotions at one time. So, and also remember, in the very beginning of the presentation, I talked about the fact that everything starts with a thought first. So what are you thinking? What are you focused on? Problems, or are you focused on what is already going well? How do we get greater self-care when we have anxiety? I think this is so important because in this last year, statistically, they say that all of us are experiencing more anxiety than we ever have. And so we really need to figure out what are some coping skills for that. First thing is to drop your shoulders. I cannot tell you how many times a day I have looked in the mirror or set my alarm and I found that my shoulders were up here, that I had been working like this for hours. Drop your shoulders. Right now, as you are listening to me, I want you to, everybody, drop your shoulders. See what it feels like. If you think about it, and sometimes when you're going to bed, I don't know about you, sometimes I feel sore, like I worked out during the day. And it wasn't that I worked out, it was that my shoulders were up and I was leaning over a computer for hours. And so without taking a break or enough breaks, without stretching, of course I'm sore. So let's go back, drop the shoulders. Hum. I know that sounds weird, but hum. Your favorite song. Feel this vibration in your throat. I wish I had time to break down all the neuroscience. If anybody wants to talk later, we can talk about it. But it releases these dopamines that really help. So just hum. Hum for about 2 minutes. You know, sometimes you hum when you're washing dishes or you hum when you don't know the words to a song. Well, do that. Do that as a part of your self-care, especially if you're feeling anxious. Then tapping. It's called EFT tapping. Some of you are probably very familiar, and for others, this could be a brand new concept. Tapping is something that you do that releases and it touches different meridians within your body, and it helps you to relax. So I'm going to demonstrate a couple of tapping techniques. So you're going to take your 4 fingers on either hand, it doesn't matter. I'm going to use my right hand, and then I'm going to hold up my left hand, and right below the pinky, I'm going to tap. I'm just going to tap here. This is a meridian point in your body that when stimulated can help you to relax. So you just want to tap, okay? And then you want to move to the other hand. I want you guys to all be doing this with me. Tap. And here's what I want us to say. Even though I'm feeling so stressed right now, repeat after me. Even though I'm feeling so stressed right now, I choose to relax. I choose to relax. Here's another point. Take your 2 fingers and go right where your eyebrows meet and tap. Even though I'm stressed right now, it's okay for me to relax. Even though I'm stressed right now, it's okay for me to relax. Then I want you to take your fingers and I want you to hit your cheekbones. Even though I have a lot going on, I deserve a break. I deserve a break. Then to the right, right below your temple, you can feel a bone here. Just tap. You know what? I'm feeling better already. Even though I've got a lot going on, I'm feeling better already. I deserve to take care of myself. So tapping is an amazing way to release stress and deal with anxiety. If you followed along with me and you were tapping, you should be feeling a different vibration in your body. I can actually feel a different vibration in my fingertips, in my face. There's a different way in which I'm feeling. So I invite you to do that. If you Google EFT tapping, there are tons of videos that will teach you more, and I highly recommend that you do that. Or reach out to me and we can do that as well. Another way to cope with anxiety is to hold an ice cube until it melts. Now, it's not my favorite, but it certainly helps to switch your mindset because it's cold and quite frankly, a bit uncomfortable. And as you do that, the cold will, one, switch your perspective, but two, that ice in your hand will release different, again, dopamines to allow you to relax. So try that. And then the last one is I want you to lay on the floor against the wall and then hold your legs straight up against that wall. So your back would be on the floor and your legs would be leaning up against the wall. And then just do deep breathing. Again, from a physiological perspective, it will reduce anxiety. All of these are proven ways that really help and really can shift your body chemistry and therefore the thoughts that are recurring in your mind. Because a lot of times when we have anxiety, we are worried, we're in a future state about something that hasn't happened, or we're worrying about something that we can't do anything about. So it allows us to free up a little mind space so that we can receive something else in. So lastly, how do we start to prioritize ourselves? What I highly recommend is that you create a self-care plan worksheet. If anyone would like to receive that, reach out to me. I'd be glad to share it with you. But what you can do is take those areas of self-care that I talked about, so professional, psychological, emotional, spiritual, etc. Write those down. And underneath each one, write down, what am I currently doing? What am I currently doing in these areas? First of all, that'll allow you to see, it would allow you to have some self-awareness about how much you're taking care of yourself, and then opportunities to take greater care of yourself. Okay. Then I want you to write underneath that, what do I plan to do? Okay. What do I plan to do? So under physical, I might write down, I sit multiple hours a day. I sometimes eat consistently, sometimes not. But then my plan would be to set my alarm for every hour to make sure to take at least a 5-minute break to stretch, check my shoulders, set an alarm to make sure that I eat. Make sure on the weekends that I grocery shop so I'm prepared. So in the middle of the week, I'm not thinking, what am I going to eat? Because I'm not in a work environment where I can go to a cafeteria. So the point is to create a plan, a worksheet for yourself so that you're committing to yourself. Because again, the best relationship, the most important relationship you can have is with yourself. I also recommend that you have an accountability partner. Agree with somebody, anybody, a family member, someone you work with, but make sure that you agree that you're going to hold each other accountable. Tell them about the goals you've created, and you don't have to have a lot of them. Maybe it's 2 or 3, but make sure that you guys check in with one another, call each other. It's great if you could have somebody at work so that when things are tight, you can call and just talk a little bit. And I know we all have friends that we can do that with, but it's different when you have an accountability partner, because then you expect to check in on a weekly basis or a daily basis, specifically about self-care. Because remember, we're restoring balance to ourselves and to the world. Okay. And so my final thoughts here would be, to set and maintain boundaries. So often as women, you know that we are giving and giving and giving. So many of us are moms, or we're caregivers to other people in our lives. We're working, we are leaders, perhaps we have community obligations. And so it's hard for us to say no because we feel a level of obligation. Our mothers did it, our grandmothers did it. Who else is going to do it if I don't do it? But who else is going to take care of you if you don't do it? So set and maintain boundaries. Reflect on your feelings and your needs. We do a great job in reflecting on other people's feelings and other people's needs, but reflect on your own. Use the chart that I mentioned. Am I feeling tightness in my chest, in my arms, in my leg, in my back? If so, your body is telling you something. What is it telling you and what do you need? Recognize what you can and cannot control. To worry over things you can't control is not helping the situation at all. Acknowledge moments of gratitude and joy, and use these self-care routines throughout the day, not just when you're in crisis, not just when you're on a vacation or holiday, but all of the time, because this is true self-care. I wrote a book called A Woman's Vault, and I have a particular chapter, and it's titled Extreme Self-Care, because I think we do a good job in it on days off, but I want us to get into the rhythm of it all the time. So it's not something extra that we do. And I want to leave you on this note. There are things that we all needed to hear when we were growing up, all of us. And there were things like, you are safe, or things like, you are enough. There are things like, it's okay to feel the way that you feel. There were things like, you are worthy, or you are someone who is worth celebrating and going the extra mile for. And I'm reminding you of this because just because we're adults and we're mothers and we're women doesn't mean that we don't need to hear these things. So if no one's telling you these things, I want you to be the parent in your own life. I want you to tell these things to yourself. Your self-talk matters. Everything starts with a thought first. Everything starts in your mind first. So tell yourself these things, because what you will manifest, who you will become, the balance you will create will make a world of difference if you have these inside of your heart. And no matter what, you matter, and your well-being really matters to me. Thank you so much for the time. I truly appreciate it. This has been fantastic. Hoping that as you listened, you've taken in some things that can help you day to day.
Muchísimas gracias, Erika. No nos podías ver porque teníamos la cámara apagada, pero aquí estábamos Janine y yo haciendo todos los ejercicios. Verdaderamente lo disfrutamos y te agradecemos mucho, pero ahora nos vamos a ir con algunas preguntas. Esta me parece muy importante.
Okay.
Sabemos que las mujeres estábamos hace varios años, algunas aún ahora, retenidas en la parte familiar del cuidado de los hijos, del cuidado del esposo. Y luego se nos abrió el panorama laboral. Y pudimos entrar, pero es como ahora tenemos que tomar la parte laboral sin soltar por completo esto. Y no tenemos tiempo absoluto para nada más, porque se nos exige 100% en ambos lados. ¿Qué le dirías a esas mujeres que sienten que están obligadas a hacerlo todo y se dejan de último?
Yeah, this is a common problem that we all face, and there's not an easy answer. The first answer, though, is to create boundaries for yourself. When you think about any change that has ever taken place in the world for any group that was ever marginalized in any way, it wasn't that the other people said, oh, we're going to stop doing this thing to you. it was always that the person who felt that they were being marginalized in some way, or they were not being treated fairly, or they wanted to change, they were the people that just had to stand up and say, no more. And so it doesn't mean to be disrespectful to your family and to your husbands, but you do have to create the boundary within yourself first. And when you are clear on your own boundary, who you are, and what you deserve, because the best and most important relationship is with yourself, then you can begin to have what I call crucial conversations with your family. And people that love you will want to help you, right? And it's uncomfortable. We're all a part of this change. So it's not like you're going to have a conversation and instantly your husband is going to understand. But this is a process that we as women are awakening to right now. And collectively, we have got to make a choice that with this awakening, we're going to create different boundaries and know that worldwide, we're all supporting each other, which is why this conference is bigger than the tips. It is about the invisible support that we're giving to one another, the permission we're giving to one another to set those boundaries, and then have loving conversations with the people that we love about what we can and cannot do going forward.
Retomando justo lo que mencionas de estas pláticas amorosas con la gente que nos ama, nos dice cómo podemos protegernos si las agresiones, la descalificación o que nos subestimen viene justo de la gente cercana, de nuestra propia familia.
Yeah, it's hard to change anyone else's behavior and feelings. So I always go back to, how do you learn to have strength in the midst of that? So what I mean is two things. Not everybody is going to agree that you should be a leader and doing things outside of the home. And there may not be an opportunity to change their minds. So back to self, you've got to figure out how you feel about yourself, what you deserve, so that you can move forward in that direction. I will also say, and I don't want to get too personal, but if you're surrounded by a lot of people who are not supportive of who you are, then you may need to surround yourself with different kinds of people. That makes sense. So I'm not suggesting everybody get a divorce, but I am suggesting that we think about the people that we are surrounded by and who we let in to our intimate circles. And if it's a family member and there's nothing you can do you feel like there's nothing you can do to separate from them, then I would say you've got to strengthen yourself, and you've got to have a very strong network of women that uplift you and counteract what you're hearing at home. But know that no one is deserving of that. So if someone is not being kind, that's not something you deserve. You deserve more.
Gracias. Erika, tenemos bastantes preguntas, pero se nos acaba el tiempo, así que rápidamente, te felicitan muchísimo, las personas están escribiendo para felicitarte. Nos dice Shaula, ¿qué tanto podemos llevar estas prácticas a través de los líderes a nuestras organizaciones?
Well, I think you can do a couple of things. Some organizations have self-care affinity groups. And those are just groups that come together for the express purpose of talking about self-care. You can put tips that I've shared on your intranet, so that when employees are looking for things that they can do, they have something they can go to 24 hours a day. When you think about your learning and development strategies, in addition to talking about communication skills and diversity and inclusion, you have training classes on self-care. I did that quite a bit last year. Of course, it was COVID, so a lot of organizations were asking for it, but we shouldn't wait for a global pandemic to have this as a training class. This should be something that's offered quarterly, so that your employees understand that self-care is a part of your culture. It is a part of your strategy for being successful. Because what we know is when people take care of themselves and they feel good, it impacts absenteeism, it impacts retention, it impacts creativity. So all of those things impact the bottom line.
Muchísimas gracias, Erika. Tenemos por aquí a alguien que te quiere agradecer. Janine quiere aprovechar para agradecerte tu presencia y tus palabras. La tenemos por aquí.
Mi querida amiga Erika, no sabes lo que representa este momento para ti. Recuerda, 5 años atrás, más o menos, en una reunión platicamos de esta idea. En octubre la empezamos a construir y para mí ver este sueño realizado y empezar a trabajar por algo más es algo muy grande. Gracias nuevamente por creer en WLB, por ser parte de esto, por optar por nosotros. Y yo te prometí que íbamos a hacer el mejor esfuerzo. Espero que esto te esté gustando. A la gente le has encantado. Creo que lo recibido la mañana de hoy va a ayudar a muchas mujeres a vivir este mundo más tranquilo, más relajado, enfocándonos, pues ahora sí, en nuestra autoestima, en lo que queremos, y no hay forma de decirte gracias, te llevo en el corazón y seguimos construyendo este sueño. Gracias. Gracias.
My pleasure, Janine. Thank you. Thank you.